Good evening, everybody. We're at the completion of our fourth day of the fitness competition. So far this week, I've seen a lot of good information out there. I love the way that everyone's encouraging each other. Also the examples as far as water, the different entrees that everyone's selecting as far as their meal choices. Things are going very well. I like the environment and things are progressing the way I like to see them progress. Now, tonight, we're going to talk about the metabolism. This is a very important subject. Not only that, it's just really to let you know how your body functions so you can understand what I'm about to ask you to do, because a lot of folks don't really understand when I ask them to eat more times a day. I'm going to hopefully help it make sense for you this evening. Now, first thing I'm going to explain to you or actually define is your basal metabolic rate. Now, this basal metabolic rate is the number of calories that you burn when you're at rest, when you're just chilling, when you're doing nothing. And to kind of make it a little bit more descriptive, just for your heart to beat, for you to just sit around and do absolutely nothing. So that's the amount of calories, and typically that can run anywhere from 1,200 calories, I've seen as high as 2,300 calories. Now, when it comes, as you get older, your metabolic, as far as your basal metabolic rate, meaning it will actually decrease. You'll burn fewer and fewer calories. And when you burn fewer calories, if you think about it, your meals don't get smaller and smaller. Actually, your meals remain around the same or sometimes even larger. And so that's why as you get older, you actually tend to gain more weight because you burn fewer calories at rest. And if you're less active, that means you're going to actually gain more weight. Now, if you think back when you were kids, and even our kids, I can't say kids today because it's a lot different today. Kids are not as active as we were back in the day. We had to stay outside, make it in by when the street lights came on and things like that. But what I'm trying to give you a visual of, kids who play outside or who are very active, they can eat what they want to eat and they remain relatively thin. They eat several times a day. They eat snacks, all kinds of things, and they really don't gain a whole lot of weight. And so what we have to do at this point, the goal is to actually retrain your metabolism back to like when you were younger, when you were a kid, if you were relatively active. In most cases, most folks were really thin back then, and they ate all day long and they could eat what they wanted to and not gain a whole lot of weight. And with that, that means that their basal metabolic rate was really high. And so we're going to retrain that, and I'm going to show you how. Now, in retraining your metabolism, I'm going to ask that you eat 5 to 6 times a day. That means 5 to 6 meals/snacks. And those meals/snacks, I want you to understand what I mean by that. You're not eating larger portions. You're not eating more food per day. You're eating more times. So if you eat 2,000 calories, you're just going to spread it out over the course of the entire day versus eating 2 or 3 times like some of you actually eat. Now, what we're going to talk as far as metabolism. When you eat, your metabolism actually, every time you eat, your metabolism goes, if you have what we call your basal metabolic rate, your metabolism will spike every time you eat or you have activity. And so that means it increases. That means you're going to burn more calories. And so what I need you to do is basically if you only eat twice a day, and say for instance you eat lunchtime and you eat at dinner, you're only giving yourself 5 to 6 hours of burn, or what I call burning at a higher rate, where your metabolism functions at a higher rate. And so 2 to 3 times, and you wonder why some folks, when they say, I only eat once a day or twice a day, how come I'm not losing weight? Well, you're actually producing body fat. You're going into starvation mode. And when you go into starvation mode, you're going to actually produce way more body fat, and your weight is not going to decrease, maybe a little bit, but you're going to lose the wrong kind of weight. And so what I want to do, I want to kind of show you a visual here. Okay, I want to kind of show you a visual, and hopefully this can help you out. Right here, the red line. I want to help you, if you're in an ER and you're seeing the EKG, we all heard of a flat line. And so this red line represents your flat line. Your basal metabolic rate is in black, and that's the black line. And remember, that's the amount of calories you burn at rest. Okay? Here, we actually have an example of where if you eat 2 meals that day, your basal starts low because nothing's going on. And then if you actually eat something, your metabolism actually functions for 2.5 to 3 hours. It takes that long to actually burn that meal through, or burn it completely up before it goes back to resting state. And so if you eat 2 times a day, it goes up and it comes right back down to basal. And then say for instance around lunchtime or dinner time, you eat again, it goes back up for 2.5 to 3 hours. And that's how long it takes for your body to process a meal. And so if you only eat twice a day, you're getting 5 to 6 hours of increased burn. And that means your basal is staying low. And remember, if your basal metabolic rate is pretty low because we're older now, then that means you possibly could actually gain weight, or you're producing body fat because you're starving yourself. Now I want to show you the example of when you eat 5 to 6 meals a day, what happens. Basal starts here, so if you eat at 7 a.m., it goes up, it takes 2.5 to 3 hours. Eat again at 10. Goes up, same thing happens, another 3 hours, 1 p.m., 4 p.m., then again at 7. If you eat in this fashion, you now have 12.5 to 15 hours of increased metabolic burn. And so that means your metabolism is at a high, it's burning at a higher rate like it was when you were younger, and it's burning all day long at a higher rate. And so I want you to understand the difference with that. Multiple times, I'm going to explain to you and talk to you about what types of foods to eat, which can kind of help trigger that. Okay, hopefully that illustration kind of helped you a little bit. So what we're going to talk about now, in the morning, if you eat oatmeal and a banana, it takes about 1.5 hours for your body to produce or actually burn. So your metabolism kicks on, and that oatmeal and banana is actually gone in 1.5 hours. So guess what? It means you still have an hour remaining that your metabolism is going to stay at a higher rate. And so when that whole meal is gone, your body's still going to, the metabolism is still rolling. It needs to burn something. And guess what? It's going to burn fat because there's nothing else left. Right when your metabolism gets ready to come down, at 2.5 to 3 hours, you need to eat again. And guess what? Another 2.5 to 3 hours is actually going to start. And so say, for instance, for your snack, you eat an apple. An apple is 75 calories, or it takes about 28 minutes for that apple to actually be gone. So 28 minutes, that means you still have 2 hours and 2 minutes that your metabolism has to burn at a higher rate. The apple's gone, so what is it going to burn? It's going to burn fat. Okay? Same thing happens throughout the rest of the day. So if you eat sensible meals, guess what's going to happen? The whole meal is going to be processed and digested and everything, and your metabolism, your body's going to say, what else is there for me to burn? And it's going to burn the fat. And that's why any credible weight loss system like Weight Watchers, anyone that you see out there, they tell you to eat 5 to 6 meals a day, smaller portions. And that's the reason why. Now, to give you an example about Papados, we all love Papados. When you go to Papados, they give you a huge platter. And that platter of food, and I love it, because to me, if I'm going to spend money or good money on a meal, I definitely want to get full. And that's the wrong mindset to have. Because even with that example, you want to eat for contentness, not fullness. Eat to be content, not full. So you want to treat each meal as if it's an appetizer, because you know you're going to eat in every 2.5, 3 hours. So there's no reason to overstuff yourself. Now back to the Papados example. You have a huge platter, the fisherman's platter. Your body can only process, meaning if you finish and complete that meal, your body can only process maybe 1/4 to possibly 1/2. The rest of all that food is going to get stored as fat. We overeat, and it takes 20 minutes for our stomach and our brain to communicate that we're full, so we tend to overeat. And so with that example, if you eat that big fisherman's platter, and it takes that 20-minute gap before your stomach sends a signal to your brain and vice versa that you're full, you've overeaten, and most of that food is actually going to be stored as fat. If you portion it out, if you go out to eat and you take a smaller portion, your body can probably digest all of that and save the rest for later. That's smart. That's eating smartly in a sense. You don't want to eat all of it in one setting. So remember, you want to eat for contentness, or to be content, versus becoming full. Another example I can give you, especially really good food, Chinese food. What happens to you after about an hour, hour and a half after you eat Chinese food? Typically you're hungry again. And you can eat Chinese food to your stuff, and even about an hour and a half later, typically you're hungry again. And so here's the thing, you're eating a lot of vegetables. You're eating that good quality meat as far as the actual chicken and things like that. If you look at the Asian culture, you don't see a whole lot of heavy people in the Asian culture. And I have arguments against actually why white rice and things like that is not as bad for you as you think, especially if you prepare it in the right way. But here's the thing, again, it's portion. But when your metabolism is primed up with a lot of vegetables like the Chinese food, it's going to be metabolized. It's going to metabolize, and then guess what? You're going to be looking for something else to eat in about an hour and a half to 2 hours because your body was able to metabolize that entire meal. I hope this lesson or this seminar based on the metabolism is really helpful for you. Because what tends to happen is if you drink or if you eat your meals, each snack, and you have a bottle of water with that as well, that gives you that false sense of fullness a little bit, or gives you a little bit of satiety, what I mean, that sense of fullness. And that'll help carry you throughout the rest of until your next meal. So remember, 5 to 6 meals a day, and especially if you're working out, that's going to help you tremendously. And that'll get that metabolism revved up. And it really only takes about 1 to 3 days for your body to actually respond to it. Because if you eat, for instance, for me, oatmeal in the morning, 2.5 hours later, I am hungry again. And that's a good sign. On the one last note, a lot of you are concerned about calories. And counting calories can be a chore. But one rule of thumb that I want you to pay attention to is all you have to do is, if you have that first meal, and if it carries you up until about 2.5, 3 hours, and you're hungry at 2.5 to 3 hours, that was the perfect size meal. If you have that first meal and you're hungry less than 30 minutes later, that means you didn't have enough to eat. If, and vice versa, if you had the first meal and then you're not even hungry at all, by the time, say for instance, 7 a.m., you're not hungry at 10, you're like still full, that means you had too much to eat. And so you want to eat portions, or the right portion, to where it should cover you for 2.5 to 3 hours. And you want it to be processed no sooner, no later. So you want to make sure you have enough contentness, in a sense, to carry you for 2.5 to 3 hours for that next meal. And then you know that meal is the perfect size. If you have any questions at all, and I know it's kind of, I tried to put it in layman's terms and not be too technical and use all those high, as far as fancy terms and things like that. But that's how the metabolism works, and that's what I do for my clients, is to get them on a regimen, 5 to 6 meals a day, and they lose the weight. If you have any questions at all, give me a call, hit me up on text, email, or however you want to do it. But great job this first 4 days, and I will definitely get back with you tomorrow.